Bible truth number 5. Let me get to the beginning here and get our list real quick. It ain't coming on, brother. We'll just use pulpit tonight. Figure that out later. Bible truths. We're on Bible truth number 5. Bible truth number 1 about grief. What everybody needs to hear in the midst of grief, there's hope. That's number 1. You don't feel that way. You can't internalize that yourself, I understand, but there is hope in your grief. Number 2, death is separation from God. And we talked about the need for salvation yourself and the understanding of what death is ultimately. So if a person's saved, they're never separated from God. They never die. And that's a great truth when you're going through the midst of grief. Number 3, this is a big one. Everyone dies. Everyone dies. So we talked for 4 weeks about broken expectations on Sunday school. If you remember, I did put that in a playlist on YouTube on its own. So on our YouTube channel, there is a playlist, Broken Expectations. If you ever want to share that out or go back and watch it yourself. But that is one of the expectations that we need to get under our belts, is everyone's going to die. I don't mean that callously. I just mean it honestly. We're all going to pass. We talked a lot during that one and during number 4, the idea that we should not shelter ourselves nor our children from the thing of death. We should not make it a taboo subject, but a subject that we should very much prepare our children for. And that was number 4, how I respond to death is my choice. How I respond to death is my choice. And so I don't want to re-preach them all. We have plenty of time though, and this once, like I said, they're for the most part short lessons moving forward, and that's always good because you never know in a grief class what might come out, what needs to be said. And so I want to encourage you. You messed up to this point, there is a playlist on YouTube for numbers 1 through 4. We got the books back there. If you don't have, or the book, it's 2 sections because I wasn't able to print them all in one. But there's 2 sections. Have the whole book back there. You could take that and then you can go and follow us on YouTube, and you could have the entire grief class over the last 4 plus 13 plus the next to get to 13. This week's Bible truth, as you know, is I have permission to mourn. I have permission to mourn. I go back and forth on it, right? The truth of this, because, it says weep not as they who others weep, right? But then I can get to this point, and we're going to go through it, but I can get to this idea that if I mourn, as a husband, as a father, I had this thought process that goes through my head, right? If I mourn, others are going to see me as weak, or how can I comfort somebody while I myself am comfortless? And so I had those thought processes. How do I do that? If I break down and weep, then I'm not helping somebody else who needs to be loved along. So we want to remind everybody, you have permission to mourn. Which side did we start with last week? We're on this side. Thank you, Brother Chris. Miss LaDonna, you are up. And let's make sure Chris is paying attention and can turn your microphone on. You're good. Go ahead, read paragraph 1.
One of the greatest downfalls of our culture and society is the herald humanistic message of self-reliance. We are taught and pressured into displaying pretenses and appearances of strength and invincibility so much that we often assume heavier loads upon our shoulders that we were never meant to bear. As a result, many times when we suffer the loss of a loved one, We automatically feel the need to be strong for those around us, appear unaffected, and be the rock of stability for others. In the process, we fail to allow ourselves to mourn the loss, which was just as deeply felt by us as everyone else, perhaps even more so.
Yeah, and I know our society has gotten sensitive, I guess would be the right word. But this is still very much true. You still very much find yourself, many of you, I did, and I know many others, you find yourself, I have to be the strong one. And the truth of the matter is, God is the strong one. And you've got to allow yourself to mourn as the Lord wills in your life. I mean, don't throw yourself on the floor for the next 35 and a half centuries. This isn't necessarily the answer either. We have to find, where does God have us. But it is okay to express your loss and your feeling about your loss. And so that's okay. Chris, next paragraph, do that little sentence after that as well.
You need to know this truth. You have permission to mourn from God. Give yourself permission to mourn, and give others that you have shared a loss with the permission they need to mourn. Receiving permission from self, from God, and from others can clear the path for appropriate and biblical mourning. Let's examine some verses about God's heart for those who suffer loss.
Yep. And so I'll say this. Sometimes you're not giving yourself permission. It's not giving those around you permission, right? And they feel like they cannot because you are not. And then they feel bad and guilty for their expression of their grief. And so I'd encourage you, I have to encourage myself, that this is a battle that I was facing for sure, is this idea of, I can't cry. I cannot do this. I cannot express this because I have other people that are relying on me, that need me to stand next to them and hold them up. But I feel like it's possible, very possible, that stripped their permission as well. And so I want to encourage you to pay attention to this. Steve, you got that Ecclesiastes ready for us?
Is it ready?
Go ahead. Remember, I'm going to ask you a question.
Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse number 1 says, "To everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven."
So God has established in the human life that there is a time and purpose for what under heaven?
Under.
Everything.
Every purpose under the heaven.
Yes, there's a purpose for everything under heaven. So everything you go through, God has purposed it. There's something to learn from it. And I don't know when the last time I taught this in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. There is an answer for why in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And I haven't gone through that in a while. I'll look in my log and see how long it was when I did that, how long ago it was that I did that. So if there's people missing it, maybe we'll recover it again that missed it the first time. Miss Rose, you got Ecclesiastes 3:4?
Yes. A time to weep and a time to laugh and a time to mourn and a time to dance.
God gave permission and included a time for you to blank your loss.
Mourn your loss.
Mourn your loss. There is a season for it, for sure. There is. All right, Genesis 23:2b, Miss Anderson. Just read the whole verse, I think.
And Sarah died in Jarba. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
The same is Hebron in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her.
So yeah. Now, if you're reading the book, let me ask the question. Abraham gave a godly biblical example when he came to
Weep and to mourn.
And to mourn for his deceased wife Sarah. So, as you're reading the book out of my sight, you'll see that the author compares Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in their mourning. And Abraham is our godly example of mourning out of those three. And you'll see that Abraham did weep, he did mourn, and it is okay to weep and mourn. It is okay to express that emotion. I believe there are emotions that are not helpful to us on this side of the veil at all. I do believe that. I believe anger is one that I can find no help in anger for anybody ever. But mourning is not one. Envy is an emotion that is not helpful in any way, shape, or form. And in fact, is sin. But mourning is one that is acceptable by God. But in every emotion, remember that our emotions should not control us. God should control us. And but you have permission. Read that paragraph there, Shel.
Not only did God acknowledge that mankind would naturally mourn the loss of loved ones whose lives ended due to the consequence of sin, but he wisely and lovingly granted permission and allowed for a time of mourning and weeping to take place in response to such a loss. No matter how strong a person is, everyone needs to be able to mourn and emote when they suffer separation from ones they love.
Yeah, I want to explain that for a minute, because if you read that cold, you might not understand it. And it said that those that whose lives ended due to the consequence of sin. Now, if you missed or are not remembering the first couple of sections, how many deaths are because of sin? All of them. And we like to say, well, I'm telling you, when Saber passed, stupid became the name of the game, right? And I don't mean to say that rudely, but somebody told my mother, who has no understanding of any situations in our family, told my mother that God's chastisement always comes to pass. And you just book things, I punch them till they don't move anymore. I don't know what else to say to that. I know that's hurtful, right? But it's also not accurate. Every death is a result of sin. Some, of course, it's active, right? We know what's going on. Somebody overdoses. That is not what happened with my son. So somebody overdoses, obviously, it's a very obvious result of sin. But it's just all results in. So I want you to understand that sentence. That we're not placing blame, right, on a certain sin that is causing that person to pass. But we are saying that sin is ultimately responsible for death. And so I just want to explain that. Hopefully that was enough. Who's next? Who wants to go? Jesse, you next? Yeah, next paragraph.
Abraham was one of the strongest, most stable, grounded men in the entire Bible. He was a man's man, tough and able to do hard things, to survive and protect his own. He was sure in his faith in God. Yet even such a pillar of faith and strength as he was, he still took time to personally weep and mourn when his dear wife died.
I want you to think about this. I'm going to ask, before we go on to number 2, I'm going to ask for questions and stuff. I'm trying to get better at remembering that. You think about this. Abraham marched his son up a mountain, laid wood on his back, left his men at the foot, and marched his son up a mountain, fully persuaded that he was going to end his son's life at the top of that mountain. That's a man, that's a tough person. That's a submitted to God individual. Now, I know he lied about his wife twice down in Egypt. I get it. He's also human and dumb sometimes, like all of us men. But even in that, he was trying to preserve his family, but he just did it wrong. But he marched his son up that hill, fully expecting to end his son's life. That's a strong person. And when his wife passed, he mourned. You are not too strong to mourn. You're not too strong to say, this hurts, and this is difficult. And I think, if nothing else, one thing I'd like you to get out of this lesson, if you haven't suffered great loss, and if you haven't, I don't know if you're breathing, if you haven't suffered great loss, when you're done with this, at least I want you to understand that we can be open with each other, and we can mourn with each other, and we can say, look, I'm going through a tough time right now. You don't have to air all your dirty laundry, but you can tell folks, hey, yeah, it's tough right now. If you'll pray for me, I appreciate it. I'm sad. Sometimes somebody asked me in the past, I've gotten better. I think I've crossed a bridge lately. But somebody asked me at some point, I think it's Brother Carter or Nikki maybe, I don't remember. Probably it's a couple different times. Where somebody say, how are you today? I'm sad. That's how I am today. Very, very, very sad. And we ought to be able to look at each other and say, I'm sad today. It's not okay. But God's good. And maybe the other person has to be the one to say it. Well, I'm sorry. I'll pray for you. God's good. There's hope. Because it's not just the loss of a loved one. That's what we mourn, right? There's other things. So I want to encourage you. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you are weak to mourn. That is still a strong person. Next paragraph, Miss Magnan, I think.
All right. It is not weakness or selfishness to mourn your loss. God expects you to mourn, so don't expect differently of yourself or of others that God does. There is a time for it, but when time is missed, it can cause very serious complications of eternal grief.
Yeah, if you don't actually allow yourself to mourn, you might come later with some real bad problems in your head. And you see those expectation there? God expects you to mourn. Don't expect differently of yourself. All right, mercy for mourning, Miss LaDonna. Mourners, Miss LaDonna, Matthew 11:28-30.
Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light.
God wants to take away our
burden
and for us to find
rest
for our souls. Yep. Praise the Lord. I didn't ask if there were questions. We'll just do it at the end. So just hold your questions. Sorry about that. All right. Job 5:11. Chris.
Job 5:11 states, to set up on high those that be low, that those which mourn may be exalted to safety.
Isn't that interesting? Safety. Sometimes when we mourn, we feel very unsafe. And our mourning gets so deep at times that we just feel despairing. And God, to Job, who's laying in an ash heap, scraping his wounds with a potsherd, and his wife just told him to, curse God and die. And I heard somebody preach a different aspect on that to kind of help Job's wife a little bit. But to curse God and die, and he's over here and he says, hey, God's going to lift up the mourners, and God's going to put you up in a safe place. There's hope. There is hope. Chris, it is the work of God to
exalt the mourner to safety.
Yeah, exalt the mourner to safety. Let's read the next two paragraphs, and then before we do exercising, I will ask for a response. Before we do the exercise, I'll ask for feedback. Steve, you want to read that paragraph?
The heavy burden of grief was never to be carried upon the shoulders of man any more than God intended for men to sin and die. We brought death and grief upon ourselves, and the cost, the weight of the burden, plainly discovered us who are framed by dust to be too frail to carry it. You must carry the burden of your grief and your loss upon the Lord. In doing so, you will find rest for your weary soul in the comfort of his steady hand, and he will exalt you from your low estate to the highest plane of safety with him.
So casting your care upon him, for he careth for you. The Bible says, speaking of the Holy Spirit, that sometimes the Holy Spirit makes utterance for us when we can't speak. And I think about when you're in that grief, this is the moment here, this truth is the moment where you can sit down and you can weep and you can allow God to work in your life and go to Him and not know what to say, but trust in the Lord, and then cast that upon Him and let Him work in your life. Last paragraph there, Miss Rose.
God has given you permission to mourn and has made provision to take your burdens of grief. There may be others whom you have unfaithfully placed your burdens of grief, leaning on the instead of God and causing them never to be able to mourn appropriately and biblically, that they may still need your permission.
Yeah, so that last paragraph kind of turns it around a little bit. And some people in their grief, they take permission and they grieve, and they don't allow others to grieve. They don't let that, they lean on that other person so hard, they don't give them the opportunity. They may impute that thought process that you have to bear me up and you have to hold me, and so they feel like they can't grieve, and so then neither of you are going to God and dealing with the things you need to deal with. So just kind of that last little throw in there. Anybody have any, before we get to the exercising Bible truths, feedback, thought processes that went through your head while we were doing that? This is a very short one, but it's pretty easy. You can grieve. Miss LaDonna.
So when it was talking about humanism, I was curious.
Okay.
And actually in chapter 2, he actually defines humanism for us. Let's see here. It's on page 22.
I didn't consider that you're reading the book. You might have questions about that too.
So humanism is an ethical philosophy that holds humankind as the absolute apex in existence. Humanism espouses a naturalistic view, which is to say they take to themselves the theory of evolution and the process of natural selection in order to explain the existence of all things in the universe and the rise of mankind as being the most highly and supremely advanced being in the universe. And the author, Dr. Hawkins, refutes that by stating biblical truth that, of course, this is rebutted in the Bible, for not only is God supremely higher than mankind, but in Psalms 8:5 and Hebrews 2:7, it says that man was made little lower than the angels.
Yeah.
I just thought that was very
Thank you
interesting.
for sharing. And if you're not reading the book, I encourage you to. It fills in a lot of gaps. But yeah, humanism's, how prideful to say we're the end-all be-all. An octopus is pretty stinking smart. They don't have consciousness, but they're very smart. My dog Waffles sometimes is smarter than some of the people I interact with on a daily basis. I'm just kidding. But so how could we do that? How could we put ourselves up? And part of humanism when it comes to death is if we are so high, how can we not conquer our own death? Uh-oh.
That was another thing that they mentioned, is that humanism, that their whole goal is to defeat death.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're always looking for innovative ways of helping people not only live longer, but to the point where, we'll never die. That's their viewpoint.
That is the ultimate in science, right, is to find a way. Don't think they aren't working on trying to find a way to download consciousness into a computer. They are. Musk and some others are actively working on that. I'll tell you this. Here's what happens. Let me give you a little insight. What we call a mental break. You've heard that statement. We see it in I don't consider bipolar as much a mental break as like schizophrenia. I think bipolar is more of a result of not controlling your impulses, and at some point that spreads so far you can't control either way. And I think parents should have done a better job of helping control impulses at times with some of these people. But schizophrenia in and of itself, right? When you're convinced in your mind of one thing, humanism, and the reality that you cannot deny, but you're totally convinced of this other thing, and the reality you cannot deny are not the same, what do you think is eventually going to happen? There's going to be a tearing of conscience, right? Where your reality, which you are 100% convinced of, and real reality do not match. And we see this in our youth in church, right? They know what's right and wrong. We teach them. But they are in this fantasy land of I can do this or I can do that, and they live there, and at some point there's a schism. And they're out of church. I'm not saying they're schizophrenic, but I think that's the ultimate end of that kind of destruction thinking, where you have a reality that just isn't there, and it doesn't match what you can see and hear and feel, and it's just this big old problem. And we see that with our youth. We see that with a lot of times in a lot of ways. And why am I saying all that? Because humanism is that's the result of humanism. Humans, there's nothing better than a human, but you can't even defeat death. No matter how hard you try, can't defeat death. You say, hey, I will download my consciousness into a computer. Guess what happened to the body? It still died. You never defeated it. You just transferred something. You didn't defeat death. And by the way, I don't know if anybody realized this, but computers suffer degradation as well. And even the transferring of data suffers degradation over time. And so if you download your conscience enough times into enough computers, you're going to lose it. It's gone. And so there's degradation in everything. What is that? Second law of thermodynamics, right? All things go to chaos. And so, all right. Any other statements, questions? Yes, sir, Chris. Not sir, Chris. I don't think you've been knighted yet, but we'll work on it.
Not yet, but you can.
You can buy
we can bring one and do
you
that.
can buy a knighthood from Ireland,
There you
Scotland.
go.
Yeah.
Like some land, right?
Yeah,
was
it's
where
that little
taken.
1 foot square land. Yeah, you're a landed lord. Mm-hmm.
I've been kind of holding off my comments because I really wanted to see where these lessons have been going.
Okay.
But these 5 lessons, like as I've sat down and really kind of studied at home, and it's kind of made me realize how selfish I've been in a lot of cases when it comes to the loss of a friend or a sailor or a loved one. Because our first, at least in my experience, our first thought tends to be in a lot of these cases, what could I have done? How much, like, what could I have done to help them, to prevent it? Like, I could have been there, whatever, right? And it made me realize that there's a lot of selfishness that tends to go into grieving in the wrong
Mm-hmm.
way, as opposed to like what the Bible's been teaching me over the last few lessons.
Sure. Yeah, and so I don't have. You remember the stages of grief, right? I don't know where it's at in here. Huh? It's probably chapter 1. Yeah. You know what? Google will be faster. They're same stages, whether it's a Christian book or a secular book. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And so part of what you're talking about, Chris, if you're so busy trying to figure out what you did or did not do, or what oftentimes if you've ever sat around the grief table with somebody at a funeral home or something and been trying to kind of deal with that circle of people, it often is trying to blame other people too, right? You and I and we didn't, and we're running through the bargaining and denial portion of that. And if we never get past that to acceptance, the acceptance is it doesn't matter, right, what you could have done. And honestly, I don't care who you are. You can't do anything about death. I mean, if it's cancer, you can't fix it. If it's depression, and let's just be transparent. Let's not hide. Let's not beat around bushes, right? In the military, we have the 22 a day, right? And if it's depression, and somebody is completely and totally lost in their own spiral, there's nothing you can't spend enough time with them. You can't talk to them enough. It is not your burden. And until we accept that death occurred, and this is where we are, then we're not going to finish grieving. We're not going to come to the end of the grieving process. And so that's a great observation there, Chris. And also, those of us in here, men especially, women do it too, I get that, but men especially, where we hold that stern countenance, and I'm guilty, 100% guilty, but where we hold that stern countenance, that's selfish. It is selfish. Okay, you don't grieve like they do. Love them in their grief, right? Give people that space, all right? Anybody else? Yes, Miss Magnan needs a microphone. He's got to unmute it.
I don't know if I said it, but when my dad died, one of the things that Carol Fry told me when I was going counseling thing with her was, she goes, Linda, you can't take your feelings and put them, like I told you, you can't put them in a box and set them aside, which was what I was trying to do. She goes, no, you can't. And she goes, I don't care if you're at church, you're at school, I was in college at the time. If something hit you, cry. Don't be afraid to cry and let other people see that you hurt. You've got to show people you're human. To hide it, it's just, it's humanism, and people have had to see that you're real.
Yeah.
Something that I noticed and I watched, the British have a saying, they don't show emotion. And I remember when Diane died, those boys stood there, no emotion whatsoever. How could you do that? But that's what they're taught.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that humanism comes in.
It does.
But, you know, when I was reading this, I thought about it, yeah. We need to be able to show our emotions. People need to see you're real and not just a robot walking around.
Right. Yeah, it's not the same as being emotion-led to show emotion, right? That's not the same thing. And the Stoic philosophy is very much a humanistic philosophy, because I can control myself. I can control my emotions. You cannot control your emotions. That's why we need the Lord to be a part of this. And so, anybody else before we get into the exercise real quick? Bella, sit up straight, please. You're distracting me. Thank you. And anybody else with a statement or a question? All right. Good. All right. Well, I really do appreciate the interaction and the engagement. I do. Bible Truth. Who was next? Is that Nikki, I think, is on Bible Truth, exercising Bible Truth number 5.1.
If you have been the one who has never been allowed to properly mourn your loss by lack of permission from yourself, from others, or not understanding God's permission, you need to open the locked doors of your heart and express yourself. Take a time to get alone by yourself where only you and God are present, and be transparent about your hurt and the pain you have suffered. After a short time of mourning and weeping, pray and verbally commit your burdens to the Lord, then rest your soul in Him.
Yeah. We're giving you permission to mourn, but we're not trying to mourn forever. We do have to pass it on to God. All right, number 2.
If there are others you know who have attempted to be strong for you, or for others with whom you have shared grief and loss and have never been allowed to properly mourn, make a list of these people. Go to them or call them and share with them what you have learned. Tell them you have had a time to weep and mourn, and now you have given the burden of grief over to the capable arms of the Lord and are resting in His assurance. Ask their forgiveness and give them permission not to be strong for you anymore.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy? Wouldn't it be a horrible thing for us as Christians to be vulnerable? Wouldn't that be terrible? Just a tragedy for us to say, I have come to a realization. I was wrong. And I've corrected it. Forgive me. That'd be great, actually. Sorry to be sarcastic. Memory verse. I'll read this. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Write it on a piece of paper. Carry it around with you. If you meditate on it throughout the week, you won't have to memorize it. That's the lesson we ought to learn about Bible memory. If we meditate on it regularly throughout the week, you don't have to stress about memorizing it. It just happened. I have written down here in my notes from my taking the class myself that, and I would assume this, usually you attract who you are to a church, so teaching this to you folks is probably less niche, right? Most of you probably struggle to express your grief and rather to be strong for others, because that's what I do, and I look out and a lot of y'all are like me in that way. I do have written down here, this lesson is mostly for a narrow group of people. Most don't fall under the not having permission to grieve category. Most grieve unabashedly. It's a handful of people that will say, I can't grieve. It's not, I can't be weak like that. Though I assume y'all probably need this lesson more than others because we are a different type of church. So, any more questions? Any other statements about grief or whatever before we go? Okay, I hope this is helpful to you. I hope that it's not a waste of time, that you're gaining from it. And if you